All right, guys, welcome back. Episode 3 of the Speed Up and Get Your Hits podcast. Welcome back. My name is Billy Barton. I'm with SpecTrain. With me, once again, I have Nick Young from Velox Training Group and Brennan from Vortex Edge. Welcome back, guys. Thanks so much for being with me once again. We are just 3 shooters and firearms instructors like getting together and talking about shooting. Hopefully, it is helpful and educational for you guys that are out there listening. We are on YouTube, on the SpecTrain YouTube channel, and also on Spotify as well. For those of you that prefer to just listen to the audio, but we have video on Spotify as well. So find us wherever it is convenient for you guys. If it's important for us to be somewhere else, let me know, and I will figure it out. But without further ado, let's dive into this week's kind of central topic. I thought would be really good for us to talk about has come up in some questions we've gotten and some of the discussions we've had already. Obviously, training is what we do, guys. So we're interested in training. We I think it's fair to say that we're all somewhat of training junkies. We've all taken a fair number of classes and looked for as many opportunities as we can to learn from others and pick up knowledge at every possible opportunity. And part of that process is this idea of vetting your instructors, right? These days, there is a ton of folks out there that call themselves firearms instructors and claim to have expertise in all manner of topics and backgrounds and experiences and all this sort of thing. And now more than ever, there are a lot of really great options available. I think in the training market, there is a ton of guys out there doing really good work and helping a lot of people. But per usual, for every one great option out there, there are 10 guys out there that are probably doing more harm than good, right? And unfortunately, it's pretty dang hard sometimes for folks to figure out, hey, who should I actually go take a class from? And so I thought we'd kind of make that our title conversation for this week. What makes a good instructor? How do I figure out what kind of class, what kind of instructor I should look for next? And also, I guess, just kind of how do you vet your instructors? If I find somebody that seems like they have all the qualities I'm looking for and has a good class, how do I make sure that their website or their promotional materials are not just full of crap and they actually know what they're talking about and it's actually going to be a good experience? So what we're going to kind of do, guys, is just kind of go around the room in kind of a round robin fashion and kind of say, hey, here's some of the key things that each of us look for when we're looking for classes, when we're trying to vet instructors. And hopefully this will be helpful for you guys to avoid making as many bad decisions as I might have early on. And I'm sure some of us have as well, and kind of wasting money and some of that kind of stuff. So I'll start it off quickly. I think with just kind of starting off kind of some macro kind of broad look at it. One of the things that I think that is super overlooked when it comes to training in the firearms space specifically is that everybody has strengths and weaknesses. And most of the good guys that are out there in the training space specialize in something, right? I've taken a lot of classes. There's guys that I've trained from. I'm like, man, that guy was really, really good at, from a defensive mindset, talking about situational awareness and social dynamics of conflict and pre-threat indicators and this kind of stuff, right? Train with somebody else. Like, man, that guy was really good at kind of use of cover and positional stuff and, gunfight timing. Man, I learned a lot from that guy on some of those kind of things. Train with someone else, like, man, that guy is really good specifically at like movement, right? Somebody else like, man, that guy is really good at like marksmanship stuff, hitting small things at far distances and, whatever the case may be. And you walk away with like really kind of specific things. Now there's generalists as well that kind of do good introductory classes, try to cover a lot of different things, but a lot of us kind of specialize in something in particular. So I don't think I think a lot of times folks, when they're kind of getting into training, will just hear from a buddy like, "Hey, man, I took this class and that was my favorite class I've ever taken." Well, guess what? Maybe that's a great class, but is it what you are actually looking for and what you need right now? Do you need your fifth performance pistol class, or should you go take a TCCC class? Right? There's a bunch of stuff you can learn out there, and a lot of different kind of niche areas, and a lot of different kinds of training, and a lot more things than just pulling triggers as well. So I guess that would be the first thing I'll throw out there is consider in your goals and what's important for you as a student, how you're progressing in your journey, like what are your priorities for where you want to get better, and then find somebody that specifically can help you with those things. Like I said, obviously, if you're just starting off taking a class for the very first time, maybe you just kind of need one of those more generalist introductory courses, and that's great. There's a lot of good folks that are doing that as well. But beyond that, I would think really carefully about, hey, what are my personal training goals, and who specifically is best equipped to help me reach those. What an example of what I'm talking about, and I'll shut up and let the next guy go before I hog the whole episode. Have heard. I can't tell you how often I have a question like, "Hey, man, I want to be a USPSA GM. Like, should I take a class or whatever?" And I'm like, yes. If you want to learn to be a USPSA GM, you should probably find a USPSA GM who can teach you how to get there. You can come take a class from me. You can take one from Ben Steger, JJ Racaza, Tim Herron, like these guys, other guys in the podcast, like rattle off a list of names of guys that can help you get there, and they come back with, "Oh, okay, cool. I was thinking about." I really want to throw names out there, but I'm not going to. But like, I was thinking about taking a class with this, Ranger qualified Green Beret Special Forces sniper Nazi hunter guy, and you're like, okay, cool. I'm sure you can learn stuff from that guy, and I know you can because I've learned a ton of stuff from those guys. Right? Like I said, everyone has a specialty, and you learn different things from different people. But what in the world makes you think he's going to help you be a USPSA GM? like there's what gives you any indication he even knows what that is, let alone what's required to get there, right? So think about your goals, where you want to be, what you want to learn how to do, and find someone to help to get you there. Who wants to go next before I ramble too far on?
Yeah, it'd be like it'd be like the same thing that person coming to one of us
Yeah.
to learn how to do CQB, right?
Yeah.
If you wanted to flip it around, right?
Mm-hmm.
We could play
100%.
some tactical dress up, but could I teach you CQB? Probably not. And
Yeah.
I think that's where this goes. Like, you need to figure out what your goals are, and then when you're picking an instructor, pick one with um, actual experience in the goals that you're trying to set. Because if there's not actual experience there, like, what are they teaching from? Like, what are the teaching points that they're able to show you from their experience. Um, so I think experience, I think it's a biggie,
Okay.
especially in the training realm
Okay.
for me personally. So like, for instance, if I'm going to go, hey, I want to learn how to do, um, CQB.
Mm-hmm.
I might go and learn from a dude that, was a door kicker for 15 years. They can pull
Yep.
from that experience and show me actual ways of doing things.
I'm
So
interested. So I have a lot of questions on this, Nick. I'm interested to get your guys' perspective on this, because experience, I think, is if you asked 100 people from the industry, hey, like what makes a good instructor, experience would probably be the most common thing you hear. But I'm so curious because it means something to so many different to so many different people.
mm,
When you say, okay, yep, experience is good, what kind of experience is required? Most instructors set the threshold for how much experience is required, just like barely below wherever they are currently, right? That's the threshold. Like, I can do this, but nobody who has less than I do can, right? Um, so obviously there's no magic line to cross where it's like, okay, now you have the experience and you can do it. But I've literally seen guys with military type background type guys be like, oh well, hey, there's a lot of guys out there teaching pistol courses that never actually had to use their pistol in a gunfight because they just use rifles all the time. I'm like, Okay, like I guess I kind of get what you're saying, but there's a time we can go too far, right? So, like I guess I would love to hear you guys talk about, like, depending on what kind of course. Obviously, your CQB, like specifically you mentioned, that's a very specific skill set that you either do or don't have experience in. But I'd love to hear you guys' thoughts on, like, okay, how valuable is experience? How specific does the experience need to be? How do you figure out whether someone actually has valuable or relevant experience? Because a lot of people claim to have done a lot of things that they may or may not have done. So dive into that a little bit farther, if you would.
Well, there's like that old saying, right? Like if I'm looking for a dude that has 15 years of experience, I want 15 actual years of experience, not 15 first year experiences. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Uh-huh.
I want a dude that has thought about this to the nth degree,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because then they can pull from that experience and help me out with it. Because I think that there's plenty, and I'm not just picking on CQB. I think there's
Yeah.
probably plenty of dudes to go around that have 15 first year experiences that that are not putting out the best stuff. If that makes sense. Does
Yeah.
that answer your question?
Yeah, I definitely think it does, right? I think what I'm kind of hearing you get at is like, man, years of experience do not always mean the same thing.
No, no.
Right?
Right.
There's a year can mean a lot of different things to a lot of different people.
Yep.
Um, so yeah, definitely keep that in mind. Um, Definitely, I would say saying I was in the military for 20 years or saying I was in law enforcement for 20 years. I mean, it means something, but it's really not significant for me. I want something a little bit better than that
Yeah.
to hear what that actually means.
And I think to add on to kind of that idea, um, I know all three of us definitely utmost respect for people who've served in the military or
Mhm.
law enforcement, and don't discount that experience at all because it's a very valuable experience that none of us have had. However, I think there's a big gap in like the quality of that experience that instructors bring to the table,
Mhm.
and so I personally I tend to see some problems with people who, yeah, maybe they did have like a crazy long career. Maybe they were special forces like their entire career, right? And then they get out and they've been out for 15, 18, 20 years now, right? And so things that were current and tip of the spear type stuff when they got out are maybe, if they have not evolved, are not so applicable now. Maybe people aren't doing things that way. Maybe that's not how the high speed dudes are getting trained up right now. I think that's specifically applicable to kind of the tactical world, more so than the competitive world, because those guys get out of it, and if they're not in it anymore and they're instructing full time, then they kind of have that fine balance to, man, they've really got to kind of do a lot of development to keep up, right? Whereas on the maybe the performance side of things, let's say a USPSA GM, right? They, as long as they're still competing and keeping up with things, are very, very current in their skill set, especially if they're competing at a high level and shooting major matches and things like that. And so that experience is consistently changing, and they're not just relying on, hey, yeah, I made GM this one time, or I used to be a high performance shooter. I don't do that anymore, but I'm going to teach you how to do it. I think there's a big gap there, and so that's why I think particularly it can be tricky to start trying to vet those like tactical law enforcement military type instructors when that's the only thing on the resume.
Yes, I think you're getting into, another one of the common buzzwords in the kind of training community, which is like the always like student first type mindset, right? Which, man, that's a tough one. I believe that 100%. I agree 100% with what you're saying. Um, I think anybody who is a serious instructor or trainer in any field, whether that is medicine or race car driving or shooting, like part of that is staying current, right? Part of that
Yep.
is not just staying current, but it is, man, like you can never be good enough, if you will. It is the mindset that I like to have anyway. There's always folks you can learn from. There's always ways to get better, and so I think if you take this stuff seriously, man, that's going to be a part of your mindset. I think it's tough to judge that in an instructor, but I will say I think one thing that's a huge turnoff for me is you're just the guy that just knows everything that there ever is to know, and and is like, this is the way that things are done.
Right.
And that comes across, I think, very, very quickly.
Yep.
I'll tell you what's a huge freaking turn off for me is when you ask why, and the answer is, well, my 20 years of this
Mhm,
experience or that experience, and it's like,
mhm.
dude, are you here to help people, or are you here to spout out your experience? And
Yeah.
another thing too, man, that I think comes up quite a bit with the whole experience thing is I think people think that, and again, I mean, zero disrespect for military or law enforcement, but I think that people think that the majority of military dudes are commandos, when
Mhm.
in
Right.
reality, you could be an army dude that is a cook. And I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with that, but what I am saying is, if you were a cook for 20 fucking years, it's not the same, as doing, as if you did, like, say, CQB for 15, 20 years, and then you got
Right.
out and specialized in teaching people CQB, because that inside out. Maybe you need to teach people how to make fondue, if you're a cook, you know.
Yeah.
There's different specialties, and so I don't know. I always look for someone that's kind of humble,
Yeah.
someone that can have a conversation with you and actually treat you like a human being. Because I think we've all been to classes where, it's almost like you're not allowed to talk to the instructor. It's like, what
Mhm.
is this? Are you a rock star or a firearms instructor, man? Like,
Yeah.
it's the strangest thing.
I think it's kind of cool almost to have it work almost in the reverse effect, where I am attracted to this person because they're putting out some good content, or I heard them say something, or I watched them do something, and I'm like, wow, that's pretty cool. And then I find out later, oh, this guy has a resume, that's pretty crazy. Like this
Yeah.
this guy's done some pretty crazy stuff. That almost just gives more weight to what he was saying before. But he was,
Yeah.
the point is that he was putting out something that was worth listening to in the first place.
Yes, some of the best tactical instructors I know with some of the best resumes literally will not tell you what they did for a living. Like, it's like
Yeah.
pulling teeth, right? And I have a lot of respect for those guys. I really do. They let their work speak for themselves, and it's not about, hey, I have this patch on my shoulder, therefore I am God type thing, right? And so I think that's really, really cool to see for sure. But like I was saying before, what I was kind of getting at, as far as the open minded, the humility, you guys touched on it a lot. But like, so I literally, guys, in my performance class, I don't do this in introductory classes because it's confusing for people. But like when I talk about grip, I go like, here's my grip. Here's like 3 other grips that like people that are better than me use that I don't work well for me, but they may or not work well for you. Here's why. This grip works, I think, better for some people than others, and different size hands and so forth. I'm like, hey, here's like 3 ways of doing this that are all right. And try to explain to people like, hey, here's how you figure that out for you. Um, I think that is the right mindset to kind of have on a lot of this stuff, because having after having trained with a handful of guys that I consider to be some of the best shooters in the world, what I've come to understand is that if you get like the 10 best shooters in the world together and ask them how to grip a pistol, the only thing they're all going to agree on is that the 11th guy doesn't know what he's talking about. Right now, that's a little bit of exaggeration, right? There's certain things they're all going to agree on. There's certain universal principles, but they're all going to tell you something a little bit different, and that's okay. So there is no, for a lot of this stuff, it's not as concrete as we would like to believe. So, the guy that invented how to shoot and just knows for sure the right way to do everything, that's that's a big thing for me. Um, I would say, going backing up and kind of moving on to another point. We've talked about this a little bit as well. I like to say that there's 3 things that kind of make a good instructor from like a macro level. One of them is definitely experience. Uh, but I would say knowledge, right? So being a subject matter expert in whatever the thing is that you're teaching, and that means a lot. Again, it means not just that you figured out how to shoot for you. Again, it's you. Hey, you figured out all the different ways to do this, why they work for some people, why they don't work for others, and you're just a true subject matter expert in whatever you're teaching. The second thing I really think is important as well is skill in whatever it is that you're teaching, right? Demonstrable skill. Why is that important? I think in some things it's less important, right? We all hear the arguments about the NFL coach or whatever is not a good player, and it's like, man, I get that, right? I also think that um, in shooting specifically, there's a couple limitations that make demonstrable skill really important. Number one, a lot of folks when they're just learning are visual learners, and actually demonstrating stuff can be absolutely eye-opening for folks about what is possible, but also B, how things are done, what it should look like. And for some folks, you can talk at them until you're blue in the face, and then you show them one time, and now they get it, right? And it's really, really important, I think, to be able to demonstrate skill. The cool thing about shooting is that I am not one of these guys that believes that I'm not one of these guys that believes in like natural talent per se. Like, shooting is one of these things that pretty much anybody can do. It requires learning and it requires work. So, being that those are the only two barriers for entry, if you're a firearms instructor, presumably you think this stuff's important. And so, presuming you think this stuff's important, presumably you've put the work in and you've learned what you need to learn to actually be good at this stuff. And if you're not good at this stuff, then I have serious questions. So skill's important. And then thirdly, you can have both of those and not be a good instructor. Having experience, having the skill, having the knowledge, but if you can't teach your way out of a paper bag, then folks aren't going to leave your course with a ton of value. And it is extremely difficult to find all three of those in one person a lot of times, right? It's a rare kind of trifecta, if you will. So to me, those are the three main things that I look for once I've figured out, hey, this is the kind of class I'm looking for. Who specializes in this? Who's equipped to teach me this? Are they subject matter expert? Can they actually demonstrate performance and skill in whatever it is we're talking about? And then can they actually communicate this stuff in a way that I can learn from them and not want to just go to sleep every 2 minutes during class? That makes sense.
Definitely.
Yeah,
for sure.
Cool. What else, guys? What else do you guys look for?
Yeah, I think just because that skill level is high too doesn't mean that they can actually teach it.
Right. So I'm saying,
you know what I mean?
100%.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, there's guys that have through trial and error, I think, developed skill and not really sure how they got there. That's a thing too. So yeah, it definitely, I think skill and being an instructor are two different things. What do you guys think about AARs?
Oh man, I think they could be pretty damn biased when you read them sometimes. I don't know. I tend to take them with a grain of salt when I'm looking to go to a class.
It's really unfortunate, right? Because like reviews, if you will, in general are like in the internet era, reviews have become like it's a key metric for folks to evaluate products, whether it's a vacuum cleaner off Amazon or a training class. The problem is you have absolutely no idea, is the person that's writing this actually, do they have any information they're basing this review upon whatsoever? I can't tell you how many of the reviews that I read, I'm going, man, I really don't think they've taken a class from anybody else ever. Right?
They may not have.
They may not have. And so if this is your first class, or if it's your fifth class with the same guy and you've never trained with anybody else, because that's a thing too, right? Do you really have any kind of ground to be like, this is a great class, or this is like the best class ever, or whatever? It's like, man, you have no clue. I took a class one time with somebody, and it was, 2-day class. By far the worst class I've ever taken. It I think I told you guys some about this, last week, but um, it was fascinating in the fact that not only was there not much information shared, there wasn't any real instruction, but it wasn't even just supervised drills. It was unsupervised drills, right? It was, hey, here's a drill we're gonna run. Everybody get on the line. You guys go, shoot this target a few times. If you run out of ammo, like go reload, come back, shoot it some more. And after about 15, 20 minutes, we'll go down range and look at targets and so forth. And then while all the students are on the line shooting, the instructor is just like down in the prone on the line, like shooting his gun too, and like going back and reloading, coming back and shooting some more. He's just like shooting as if he's one of the students on the line, just like minding his own business, like letting all the students do their thing. And that was like the way it was for basically 2 days. Um, I say that not to bash anybody in particular or this particular class. I say that because there was this couple there that I talked to at the beginning of the second day. After I got done with the first day, I'm like, wow, that was like ridiculous. I come back and they're like, oh yeah, they're like, man, this guy is just like incredible, man. We just learn so much every time we come to one of these courses. And it's so cool because not only does this guy have all the real world experience, and not only is he such an incredible shooter, but man, he's an expert in adult education, and he just like knows how to deliver information. And I'm sitting there going,
Dude,
he did not deliver information to anybody at any point, like over this entire class. What are you talking about? And I go, who else have you trained with? And like, oh, we've taken like 6 of his courses. And I'm like, man, you just have no idea what you're missing out on. Like, you just keep coming back to this because it was the first course you ever took. And you were like, man, this guy is so much better than I am, right? I'm so impressed with what this guy knows and what he's able to perform because I'm just brand new. Of course, that's generally going to be your first impression. Unless somebody's like really, truly off their rocker, you're probably going to have a decent first impression of whoever your first instructor is. But man, it's like, get out there and train with other folks before you start writing these AARs. So like I said, I definitely take those with a grain of salt. To me, the most valuable recommendation that I take very seriously is when an instructor recommends another instructor to me. I take that very seriously, and that has proven generally to work very well for me. If I'm taking a class from this guy, I took a class from Scott Jedlinski as an example, right? And man, it's like, okay, this guy's really good. He's a great teacher, great instructor. He's putting on a great class. Obviously, has some skill. He's checking all the boxes. I think he's putting on a solid class, right? Well, about 5 times, through the first day, I felt like he's referencing Ben Steger and how he learned things from Ben. And hey, I picked this drill up, and man, when you go to his class, you'll see him do this, and so on and so forth. I'm like, okay, that's a pretty good indication. That's somebody else I should probably add to my list, right? Went to a class from Ben, and sure enough, it was phenomenal. Instructors not only have no incentive to recommend other instructors who aren't very good, they have nothing but negative incentive to do that, right? We don't if I am recommending my competition to you, it is because it's somebody that I really respect and think is going to help you. It's the same with these guys on the podcast. For those of you that are listening, when I recommend Brennan, I recommend Nick to you guys, it's because, man, I've shot with these guys. I spent time with these guys. I know these guys. I know how they stack up to other folks in the industry, and I'm impressed with what they do, and I know they put on a good course. So for me, I don't know. That's kind of my general thoughts about AARs and kind of their value. But I have found, hey, if you take a good class from a good instructor and you ask him for other recommendations, that has tended to work out pretty well for me. What's your guys' thoughts?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think that plays into another way that you kind of another option for vetting instructors, and that is by word of mouth. However, take take word of mouth recommendations with a grain of salt, the same as you would a written AAR online. In general, as negative as the world seems to be, people are fairly hesitant to admit, I think, that maybe they spent a lot of money on something that was pretty useless. And so I think with word of mouth, it's nice because you can, especially if you're having a conversation with somebody, you can ask them questions about the class, like straight up, like, oh, like, what did you guys do? Or like, what was the concept that you learned or that he dove into? Or how was the class structured? Or was the instructor professional? Or was it well run? Was he respectful of your time? Like there's things that I can ask somebody else who's been to a class, some key questions that'll give me a really good idea of what that class is like, especially if you've been to a number of classes and can kind of piece together some of that information. So word of mouth definitely one of the things that stands out to me, and I just mentioned it, but professionalism. So I think, well, there may be some people who are not like this, but man, I have a hard time learning something in a learning environment where the person delivering that information is not being professional, and when I just can't get past the fact that hey, he showed up late to class, or he wasn't prepared for this, or he didn't bring enough like freaking targets, or like he didn't account for this person, or he squeezed somebody in at the last minute and now the class is too full and now I'm getting fewer reps or something. And so I think that has a lot to do with it too. I think if someone is well organized, runs a structured class, is on the ball as far as communicating both before, during, and after the class, that gives me a pretty good idea of probably how the day is going to go. And that generally gives me a pretty good feeling. I've definitely gone to a class before where there was just pretty much zero communication before the class and not much kind of like by way of the website and things like that. And so I really didn't know what I was walking into. And I think especially for people who may be new to the training world, that's really, I would say that's pretty unprofessional. I think you need to give students a good idea of what to expect. And that way, that you're setting them up to learn the most that they can, so that they're not messing around with gear or lunch or whatever it is, and those are the little things that are, kind of outside of the actual teaching part. But I do think that's pretty important.
Yeah, 100%. I think it's going into being a good instructor rather than just a good shooter, right?
Right.
Yeah, this is being a good instructor and putting on a good class is a completely different craft from the noisy part of it, and it takes just as much learning and trial and error and so on and so forth. I know we've all
There's actually not a whole lot of
there.
noise on your part going on while you're teaching anyway.
Yeah, it's
You know
very
what I mean?
true. Common misconception is that firearms instructors get to shoot all the time. It's like, man, I shoot way less than I did before I started teaching, for sure. And you don't really get value out of the shooting that you do over the course of a class, because
No.
gear, it's just execution of pre-established skill. It's not training, right? Very, very different stuff. So anyway, I got some more stuff. What do you guys got? Anything other points you want to bring up?
Yeah, I think back to that AAR thing,
Yeah.
and why you have to take it with a grain of salt is because I think that some people go to classes for the experience, right?
Sure.
And not that there's anything wrong with that. I
Yeah.
will take you guys on 100%. Come to my class for the experience, right? Although I doubt that they're listening to this podcast.
Right.
But yeah, I think that they take the class for the experience. And then when you read the AAR, it was like, well, it was really hot that day. And, I think the guy next to me had COVID, and we shot for too long. And it's like, dude, what the hell, So I don't know. I think kind of trying to figure out, is that person the actual, does that person have the same interest that you have, right? Trying to figure that out while you're reading the AAR. I think that would help a bunch.
Yeah, it was so funny. Some of the things that we do at SpecTrain were like like negatively influenced by an AAR we got one time. Not negatively, but that's the wrong. Negatively reinforced. I don't know if you heard this. You weren't there for this, Brennan, but we had this AAR one time that was like, it's like, man, it was like sometimes they painted the steel a color that kind of blended in with the background. Sometimes it made it difficult to see,
Bless his
and
heart.
and sometimes there was like dust and stuff. They really should have had like shooting mats down so we didn't get dirty while we were like kneeling and like all this kind of stuff. So my buddy Chris, he used to work with me at SpecTrain before he moved up to Vortex Edge. Man, he went out and literally bought like camouflage colors of paint that we always painted the steel with from then on, like to make them blend in as much as possible and like all this stuff. He was like, I'm not, it was hilarious. But yeah, you're completely right. Definitely, folks that are looking for different things, out of those courses for sure. I had to give Chris a little quick inside joke. Had to give Chris a hard time, Brennan, because you guys have shooting mats now.
Yeah,
But,
for a slightly different reason, but
yeah.
Side note on steel blending in with the backgrounds. Come to find out, like white steel that's been shot up a good bit
Mhm.
against a berm that has snow that's also been shot up a good bit is very difficult to see from 200 yards. Anyways, I found that out this weekend. But
Duly noted.
Unfortunately, you don't get too much snow in Carolinas. So
it snowed here today.
Did it really?
Well, in air quotes, snow.
In the air.
Yeah, it snowed for like 30 minutes. Yeah.
Well, you're welcome to come up and get some of ours, man. It's like 1 degree, and it's gonna be negatives tonight. And yeah, my truck is frozen solid, so it's a fun time.
I'm good.
Literally ran my air conditioning last night. But anyway, back on point here. I think one thing I'll mention is, it's sometimes as discerning as you are, if you take enough classes, you're probably gonna take some bad ones. It's just kind of part of it, and there are there's kind of cliques in the training community, right? There are schools of thought that kind of run together. And these not always bad things, right? But my point is, it is possible to go train with 3 or 4 of the guys that run together in kind of a certain school of thought, and only be getting one side of the story. I would encourage people, if you go take a course and you like that course and it's your first course or whatever, your first serious training course, great. If you took his level, so you're taking a level 1, you want to go tap back and take the level 2, great, do that, and then go find somebody else that is different than the guy you just trained with, right? If nothing else, maybe they will just reinforce why some of the things you already learned are right. Or you might get a whole different side of the story and be like, man, okay, some of the stuff I really thought was true, I'm starting to I at least need to go experiment with now. And see, okay, what really is right, what's really best in these kind of things. I think variety is super, super important to help you figure out, okay, what do I actually believe here? What's right here? What's the kind of the right school of thought to kind of belong to in some of these areas? Because if you only train with one kind of guy or one guy in particular, you're limited by that one person's knowledge and experience, and there's no reason to be limited in that way. Thankfully we can leech off of everyone that's out here and their different specialties and what they're good at. And I think you learn a lot better that way, and it's much easier to figure out what's kind of right and what's BS a lot quicker that way. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, that goes back to the whole idea of there's multiple right ways to do something, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's multiple correct ways to become a national champion,
mm-hmm.
right? Because there's a good big handfuls of national champions, and they have some pretty different style.
Yep. Cool.
Yeah, I think it's really important, man. I think it's really important because different instructors are going to say things differently, right? All 3 of us teach fairly similar shit, but we're going to say it in a different way that might, strike a chord a little differently with someone else. Like if someone took my class and I tell them how to grip a pistol and Billy tells them the same exact thing, one of us might, get through to that person more than the other did based off of how we said it, or, just our personality clicked with that person better than the other person. I've taken a lot of classes and I've heard a lot of the same stuff, but like I can remember moments where, someone said something that I probably heard before, but they said it in such a way that it was like a freaking light bulb. And I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
holy smokes, man. That, or I was just ready to hear it at that part of my journey or whatever. I think that's also a thing as well.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, yeah, 100%. I think you're definitely ready for things at certain times. And and I have taken a couple very select courses more than once. And had the same experience there, right? When you come back second time, sometimes you get like entirely different stuff, and you're like, man, I know
Hmm.
he said that last time, but it means something different to me now than it did 2 years ago, right? So yeah, I think that's extremely true for sure.
So I've got a question for you guys,
Yeah.
if that's okay. So, what do you guys think about instructors who, so from the viewpoint of vetting instructors, right?
Mhm.
And you've got lists to choose from. What do you guys think about the instructors who are choosing like an extremely niche kind of corner, right? Where they're maybe teaching, let's just make something up. I'm teaching off body mechanics in, this type of situation as a parent in a freaking minivan or something. And like, that's the class, right? So
Yeah.
like, and then they kind of build their thing, their whole instruction, their whole company maybe off of something super specific. And I'm making that up, right? But you guys get the point.
Hmm.
Because there definitely are some instructors who are like that, and then people rant or they rave about this person who was able to teach them, and hey, this is the only person who's doing this very 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 specific thing, teaching that, and so you need to go to this person because they're the authority on that. And in reality, maybe they're just one of very very few people who teach that. What do you guys think about kind of that very niche class?
I think it's a gimmick. Specifically the the in a minivan with a baby, that type thing. No, I think it's a total gimmick, man. You know, you guys know just as well as I do. The majority of people, what they need is to learn how to actually hit shit.
Hmm.
You know, um, that I think a lot of times the classes like that, the really niche ones where, all right, we're gonna focus on this thing and we're not going to talk about shooting fundamentals at all. I think a lot of the times what happens at those is shooting completely goes to shit and we're not worried about hitting anything, when in fact that's probably what could save your life, if we're talking about a self-defense situation, right? um, I don't know, man. Points in time are points in time, whether it's a match or self-defense. And so I think a lot of those type classes, I think I know what you're saying, Brennan, but I think a lot of those type classes that I think that you're trying to describe are, it's a freaking gimmick to me.
I think there's definitely different levels to it, right?
Yep.
So like, um, first of all, I think that like if it is going to be a niche class, it better be some advanced level stuff.
Yep.
Hmm.
Um, to me, this is not. I'm not going to go spend 2 days learning how to do one particular thing if I don't know how to do all the other stuff, right? So what I'm saying is, for most people, you just need to start off with kind of more of a generalist class. Like you were saying, shooting fundamentals, how to draw your gun, like more basic general stuff. Learn a little bit about a lot of different things. And then sure, like once you get to a super advanced level, if you want to go to, JJ Rakaza and say, hey man, I want you to teach me just how to do entries and exits for 2 days. Like, sure, if that's what you want to do, like, cool, do your thing. I think, but the point is, unless it's super advanced, super niche stuff is not going to have, I think, the value for folks. The other thing is, I think a lot of the niche classes are It's mostly marketing, to be honest. Like it's
Yep.
like I'll be honest with you. Like I've already mentioned, I think Scott Jedlinski puts on a fantastic class, right? It's a fantastic performance shooting class.
Yep.
Like the amount of stuff in there that's super specific to the red dot is probably like an hour's worth, right? like,
Yep.
like to be totally honest.
So that's a great example, right? Like red dot
Yeah,
classes.
right.
Like anybody who's been shooting red dots to a high level of proficiency for any amount of time knows that a red dot class should just be a shooting class,
Right.
right?
Now, there's some specific stuff with the dot you should know, and like there's stuff I can tell you. Like if you're in the transitioning from irons to the red dot, I'm like, hey, here's some specific things you need to work on. Like here's a couple things you need to know, a couple concepts. Don't tape your dot. Like just some basic stuff. And no, I'm sorry. Um,
But do you
and
need 2 days to do that?
no, absolutely not. Right. So just know that I've taken, like you kind of mentioned, I took as an example, I took Ian from Rune Nation's course at Ohio Range Day, his limited signature carbine course, right? Um, Got to be honest, I didn't really know that much about Ian before that. I got stuck in that course. I was like, cool, I'm going to go into it. It was a great course. I enjoyed myself. Ian was a great instructor, put on a fantastic course. And the kind of the premise behind the course was, all these folks, civilians that run rifles and so forth, like where are they actually going to run a rifle from? It's probably coming out of a bag or something like that. And the idea was like pulling rifles out of like truck gun bags and stuff and actually using them, which was a cool idea. However, I can teach you everything there is to know about pulling a gun out of a bag in about 15 minutes, right? And then the rest of it is just how do we shoot our rifles, right?
Right.
It really had not a ton to do with pulling the gun out of the bag. Now, it was cool that folks who probably had never like practiced that before got some reps in throughout the day. But just understand that, guys, if you're looking at courses, like a lot of those niche classes, like it still is a shooting course with maybe
Yep.
like the first hour of the day about that particular thing, if that kind of makes sense. Is that kind of what you were getting at, Brennan?
Definitely. And I think there's a lot of people who, I mean, the reason that I think some of those really niche courses sell, and I agree with Nick, I do think for the most part they're marketing gimmicks. The reason they sell is because people want the dopamine rush of doing something that they think is cool,
Yeah.
and maybe something that they don't get to do very often. So one thing that comes to mind, and I've put several different polls out on my stories and things on Instagram, asking people what kind of classes they want to take, right? And almost everyone has taken a shooting class, or several, or many. And there's specific classes that they want to take, like I want to take a low light class. So okay, well, are there a lot of things that you probably need to learn about low light? Yes, but can probably a lot of them, most of them, be learned without even any shooting involved? Also,
Yes.
probably yes.
Also, yes.
And so, is it illegal
majority of
to,
it.
or is it okay to take your lights out and shine them at each other and around your house and stuff in the dark, and figure out how lights work around different things like photonic barriers and things like that? Yeah.
Yeah.
But people want to go run a weapon mounted light and push the little tape switch or push the little button and bang, 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 and feel really cool about themselves, which is fine. I'm not saying that a low light course is bad, but a lot of times I think they're coming for the experience again, and they want to do something cool like that, or they want to do force on force, right? And maybe they don't have the capability to do that, and so they're just kind of coming to almost even just get reps. And so I think that sometimes you need to just balance that out. And I've definitely taken a class like that before, where it was like, I've never shot under low light before, and I just wanted to do it.
Yeah.
And I
Right.
did it, and I learned a couple things, and didn't really learn anything about shooting, and learned a couple things about kind of like how to interact with like lights and stuff, and that was cool. But it was cool to get 2 days of like shooting in the dark, because I had nowhere to do that.
Right.
So I think that's just another thing to maybe for the viewers to be aware of, is it's totally okay to go after something because they're maybe offering experience that you can't get normally. But be aware of just, if they're really good, they're going to have a lot of content on that niche topic, or it's going to be a little bit of content like Billy was saying, and then just a shooting course after that.
I think that's a great point, and I think there's nothing at a certain point, like it's nothing wrong with that idea, right? The different folks are looking for different things out of courses, and it's not necessarily right or wrong. I think it's a challenge for us as instructors that we have to balance, right? There's folks that are coming to classes to learn things, and there's folks that are coming to classes to practice things.
Yeah.
And neither one of those are necessarily wrong. There's folks out there that don't have much opportunity to practice certain things, other than in on the courses during like a course like that. Now, I will say, like you were saying, Brennan, like almost all this stuff you can work in dry fire. So there are certain things that I refuse to spend a lot of time repping out on the range, like reloads. Like I'm just not going to let you get 100 reps on reloads on my range. Like we have better things to do. Like you can dry fire that. But at the same time, like, you're on a low light course, you got to understand, like there's some people that just want to come out and shoot a lot in the dark. I mean, you kind of have to facilitate that to a certain
Yep.
extent in some courses. So it's tough because as an instructor, you're like, man, I could teach this stuff and we could dry fire it all. And then we can just confirm it at the end with about 50 rounds and we can go home, right?
People would be so mad, man.
They would be
People
so
would
mad.
be so mad.
Yeah, 100%. So yeah, it's a balancing act for sure.
We had a student who like really wanted to do some low light here up here at Vortex Edge, and he's like, man, I just really wanted to get some some experience, because we mentioned we might do that as part of some of our carbine stuff, just kind of go over weapon mounted lights and things like that. And we ended up deciding against it because there was a lot of other stuff that we wanted to work on, and it felt like it wasn't maybe the most important thing for the whole class. And he was kind of like really bummed. And so afterwards, I was like, hey, come here. So like we walked into the range, working in the indoor range. I just like turned the lights off. I was like, all right, like here you go. And I like literally explained to him, I'm like, man, you can figure a lot of this out on your own. You could still activate your light during daylight, and then you can shoot, and then you can also like run this light at night in your house or in your yard. And he was like, okay, that's pretty fair. I'm like, do you have trouble activating your light? He's like, no. I'm like, all right. So like, go figure out how it behaves, in different environments. He was like, fair point. I was like, and then we spent a lot of time, doing a lot of shooting stuff that he can't maybe do on his own. And so yeah, one of those things. It was like he was really after the experience, and then realized, oh, the experience is maybe not as mind blowing as I thought it was. We just turned off the lights.
Night vision classes are very, very similar to that.
Yeah.
Because the majority of night vision stuff, man, it's number one, how to actually work your stuff, and then number two, figuring out spatial awareness, how to get around objects, how to adjust your stuff. I mean, that's the hard stuff. The shooting stuff is the easy part, man. You put the freaking dot on it and press the trigger.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right.
So true. Yeah, it's it's interesting. I will say as well, along these lines, for folks that are just looking for opportunities to do types of shooting that they don't normally have access to, once again, matches are a thing. Now, in this case, specifically, we talk about a lot about USPSA. Not going to help you if you want to shoot in the dark, but most areas these days, I think, probably have some kind of low light match. It may even be an annual deal, right? When I lived up in Southwest Virginia, there was an annual IDPA night match that happened, right, in a nearby range where they would go shoot all the stages in the dark. Not a big IDPA fan, but if you want to go get reps shooting in the dark, like those kind of things, those kind of opportunities do exist. So get creative with it. Look for it. You can spend $25 to go shoot in the dark, versus doing a course every year or whatever, and maybe go learn some other stuff. So anyway, guys, we've kind of gone around and talked a lot about this. Obviously, we could go on more. But I feel like we've given some folks some good info. Any last points that you guys feel like we need to hit before we move on?
Yes. One last thing I would say is, I tell people this a lot who maybe it's the first time they're training, or the first time they're training with me. I tell them that they need to have like a common sense, or a BS, awareness, right? So if something doesn't pass the common sense test or the BS test, right, there's probably a reason for that. And so I always tell them, I'm like, maybe we're working on pistol grip or something, right? And I'm like, does that make sense to you, right? And they'll either say yes or no, and usually it's yes, right? I understand that gripping the pistol this way or applying pressure here affects the gun this way, and I'm like, okay, that makes sense. So what I would encourage you to do is anytime you're listening to somebody tell you something or tell you how to do something, if it doesn't kind of pass the common sense test, right? Or if they can't show you why it works that way and why that might be a better way than what you do, that's something I'd be wary of. And I apply the same thing to instructors too. So if an instructor can't tell you why you should maybe train with him, maybe you shouldn't train with him, or maybe you should maybe not prioritize him so high, right? I've talked to a couple people who I've wanted to take classes from in the past really badly. I was like, man, that seems like a great class. He seems like such a good shooter, such a good instructor. And I've had interactions with him like over email, and it was like he couldn't give me he couldn't like back up his class. He was just like, well, just come to my class and see.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, I kind of sense a little bit of BS here, and possibly maybe you don't have a whole lot to offer me. And so I always encourage people to just try to run things by their own common sense, and see if things are like making sense. And I think Scott Jedlinski, you mentioned him, or either of you guys, right? You guys put out content on your Instagrams and YouTubes, right? And I can watch that and see, okay, yeah, this is somebody who has a skill that I don't have. That's a skill I'd be willing to pay to learn. And they constantly explain, here's what I'm doing, and that gives me a good idea of, hey, that's maybe something I could learn if I went to a class with this guy. And people who are real tight-lipped about that stuff, kind of generally tends to give me pause. And so I'd encourage people to maybe kind of take a look at that sometimes when you're looking at some training opportunities.
Yeah, 100%. There's no secret sauce that like one guy has that no one else has.
Right.
If they think they do, and they can't give away their trademark secret on how to pull the trigger in a super special way that'll make you the best shooter ever, that's probably not a good indication of what they're actually putting down in their class for sure. So, folks that actually put out good information, try to educate people, and demonstrate skill with like hits and like targets and like times and stuff. All good stuff.
And to be perfectly honest, like there's nothing that I teach in a class that I wouldn't be willing to share online.
100%.
Like none of it. Like no part of it's secret. None of it is you have to come to a class to find it out, and none of it is hey, I won't have that conversation with you until you're an alumni. Like that's really stupid. And if instructors are doing that, I think that's stupid.
Yeah, interestingly enough, there's only like one or two things that I kind of shy away from on the internet talking about it all, and it's all out of respect for other instructors that I learned stuff from. And it's not even like concepts; it's like specific articulations and drills and stuff. It's like, man, I'm not going to put this guy's business out on the internet. If he doesn't want it out there. But yeah, other than that, pretty much anything I will talk about with anybody.
Yeah.
No,
and the draw is come get one-on-one time, right? And let me like give you feedback with you right in front of us, and give us something to work with. I think we're all that way.
100%.
Yeah, I pretty much give it all. I pretty much said everything that I've said in a class online. I think the only difference is it's just not as in much detail as I say it in a class, simply because I don't think people are going to sit there for 40 minutes on their phone and listen to how I press the trigger.
Right. Fair enough.
I would watch it, Nick.
I would too.
I'm still not going to do
it. All right. Fair enough.
Cool. All right, guys. I think it was a good discussion. Obviously, lots more to talk about. Maybe we'll do another one at some point, bring up some more stuff. But yeah, finding and vetting instructors is hard. You're probably not going to have 100% success rate, but hopefully those are some tips, guys, that may be helpful for those of you that are trying to figure this thing out. This week in shooting, thought we'd go around and talk about kind of what we've been doing, what we've been working on. I would love to hear from you guys if you guys have anything that you're working on or doing this past week. I will tell you something. And Nick was there, so maybe we'll talk about the same thing. Obviously shot
I don't
the.
want to talk about that match. I'll talk about it. I'm kidding.
I am so freaking excited, Nick. So if you're in the North Carolina area, there is a match, and it's called the GoShoot match. And it's put on by a fella by the name of Chris Tilley, who he just gets up in the morning to crush your soul. That's just what makes him happy. No, Chris is a phenomenal shooter. He generally puts on a very technical match. Specifically, the match we shot on Monday, I think, was probably the most difficult and technical match I've ever shot in my life. The shooting challenges were
I would concur.
Wow.
Very challenging. Around here, I can't speak for the entire country. Around here, the local matches tend to kind of be a cakewalk as far as the difficulty of shooting challenges presented. Now, that doesn't mean that the matches are easy, because you're still trying to perform as well as possible on those shooting challenges down to the individual percentage point and so forth. And so it still takes a lot of effort. It's still challenging in that sense, and it's still valuable, and you learn stuff from doing that. And in an effort to do that, you can still screw up even on easy challenges. However, that doesn't necessarily prepare you for things you see at majors and more difficult shooting challenges. The reason I'm excited is because I think it's really great to be finding a place that I can be putting in some more work on with the really difficult stuff, guys. Because if you're shooting 35-yard partials every week in matches, when you go back to the match, that's is like, man, the hardest target, it's a 25-yard open target. That's going to seem like a real walk in the park, right? And that's kind of a training mindset thing too. It's like, man, are you training at exactly the level that you want to reach, or are you pushing yourself way harder than you think is even realistic so that the hard stuff seems easy? If you want to, the standard you think is reasonable is to get a 2-second build drill at 7 yards, right? Once you get that, are you just happy, or are you like, okay, now we're gonna do the same thing at 15? Right? That's kind of the mindset. So anyway, really, really cool. A lot of cool shooting challenges that it's changing the way that I'm training and practicing for sure. I think it's exposed some weaknesses I need to work on. Yeah, I think a lot of throttle control stuff and just generally really difficult targets is going to be a focus of mine in training more than it has been. Difficult stuff at distance, a lot of really, really tight partials, but also combining all that stuff with, open hoser targets as well. And, just throttling back and forth between those, I think is really, really cool. So yeah, that's kind of where my head's been at in this past week. do harder stuff. Do harder stuff is the takeaway there, I think.
Yeah, I will piggyback off of that because I was at that same exact match.
Yeah.
And yeah, the small partials, I'll tell you what kills me, man, and maybe this is just a mental thing, but the freaking poppers that fall really slow. Like, I'll call the shot and like I'm starting to move and I hear the ding and I'm like, I don't see it going down out of the corner of my eye.
Still there.
And then my mind goes back to that popper. So yeah, my first stage, man, that's exactly what happened. Shot that freaking big ass slow popper to activate that partial swinger that was on the completely other side of the bay. Shot it, called a good shot, heard a ding, and as I'm moving away, I don't see it going down out of the corner of my eye. My mind was on that popper and totally blew by 2 targets, and I can't remember the last time that I just ran by 2 targets. So that's what, freaking 60 points gone, like first stage. So I was
Yep.
like, well, this match is kind of hosed. So
Yeah.
yeah. So yeah, I love that match, man.
I do too.
Just
Yeah.
for the same exact reasons that you said, man. Those little steel bastards that he puts up at freaking 30 yards, like it's a really difficult match, and I love it. I love it.
Yeah, 4-inch
Uh,
plate at 30 plus yards, guys. It's good
Really?
times. Oh yeah,
yeah.
yeah. He
And
had
I'm the kind of dude, man, like if I went and completely just smashed it every time, I'd be like, I'm not going back to that. You know what I mean?
mhm.
I don't know. I would rather go and lose and figure out what I need to get good at, because then it gives me something to work on, rather than just going and winning every single time because it's easy.
Yeah,
I don't dig that.
yeah. I feel a lot of matches, a lot of the way I think local USPSA matches, it's like it's strictly about how fast can I do this without like the
Mm-hmm.
wheels coming off, right? There are no difficult shooting challenges. Like anybody could stand here without a clock and execute these shots and have no problem with it, right? That's the way a lot of the matches are set up. And then it's just about, okay, how fast can I do this without screwing this up? It's not the way that match is at all. So anyway, guys,
Mm-hmm.
look for opportunities to do hard stuff and give yourself difficult challenges. I think you'll find it valuable for sure. You got anything on that, Nick? I mean, Brennan. Sorry.
Yeah. I actually have not shot a match since the last podcast. And I've got a classifier match coming up in January here. It's
Ooh.
like all old classifiers.
Oh.
I'm mostly doing it because one of my buddies is doing it,
Uh-huh.
and but you know what? I also decided that you know what? If I'm at a certain percentage that I think I should be at, or should be shooting at, or is being reflected in my match placements, then I should be able to probably lay down a pretty comparable score even on the old classifiers. And so some mindset things, some mindset shifts and stuff. So I'm actually not really worrying about it at all. And I know what the classifiers are, and I'm not really dry firing them either.
Nice.
I'm just kind of hammering out my own fundamentals, on my own training sessions, making sure that I can hit what I want to, and make sure the speed is there. And I'm not really changing anything about how I train. So I think that's probably a good sign based off of my past kind of history in the sport a little bit. The stuff I've been doing is been pretty cool. So we're in the middle of, or at the tail end of, wrapping up some curriculum development on some of our specialty classes, and the one that we've been spending some time on. Well, not me, but some of the other instructors have been spending some time on, is our CQB course. And so it's been really cool to jump in, and essentially they're teaching through the course, and we're ironing out details and timing and things like that. But I get to just sit there and kind of soak that stuff up. So that's pretty cool. So I get to learn from, a couple guys who, did that stuff overseas, both in the military and out of the military. Some guys who are previous SWAT or current SWAT, Green Beret, right? It's pretty cool to kind of get everybody's input into one course. It's pretty cool. So I'm learning a lot of stuff there, and it's honestly pretty fun to jump into a class where like everything or mostly everything is new. And honestly, that's a pretty cool feeling, and I don't get that opportunity very often. So been doing that, and learned a bunch of stuff, even just about how I run a rifle too, and also learning some stuff that's a lot of my shooting skills that I've developed kind of with chasing the USPSA thing around has kind of directly applies, which is pretty interesting. A lot of the footwork stuff is exactly the same. You apply it a little bit differently, right?
Are you trying to say shooting is shooting, Brennan? Is that what you're trying to tell us right now?
Oh, I mean, I wouldn't dare to say that. I wouldn't go that far.
You're gonna get people all riled up doing that.
But it's pretty cool to see dudes who literally did that for a living for years and years and years, saying, hey, the same exact principle that we talk about in our pistol classes, right, applies here. You actually don't want to drop step into a room in a stack, or you're going to step on your buddy behind you. Also, that's not good timing, right? And so, like you want to probably just kind of launch off the leg that you're loaded on. And it's like, wow, imagine that, right? A lot of the transition stuff, right? Target transitions. You see one thing, you've got to transition your focus and attention, and maybe your gun to another thing. There's a lot going on, so it's pretty interesting to come from a purely civilian performance shooting background and then start learning kind of what goes down a little bit with some CQB stuff and see some of the similarities there.
Did they do any shooting on the move in CQB?
Yeah.
Man, how about that? That's cool.
Pretty much all of it. It's really interesting.
Yeah.
And so what I just heard was footwork, visual awareness, marksmanship. I mean, shit, man. You sure it's not a USPSA class?
Yeah, right. A USPSA with Sims. No, but it's been cool. It's been cool, and I think it's cool for maybe even some of the guys who that is their specialty, for them to see a lot of the benefits of like shooting matches. You really develop a good skill set to where maybe you come in here, you don't know anything about this, but you end up being a really good student. So that's cool. So, anyways,
there are
out there, and
there are definitely worse things to get paid to do, for sure.
Yeah, that's an accurate statement.
Yeah, very cool, man. Good stuff. All right, some questions answered. We're over time already, but I've got a couple good ones. I think maybe we'll keep it to just one for sake of time tonight. We're gonna finally bow to the pressure and have a gear question, which I know is probably most of what we get a lot of times and what we care the least about. But one of the most common pistol questions I get anyway, other than the like, what gun should I get and like that kind of stuff, right? Is like whether it's a Glock, whether it's a Walther, whether it's a SIG. Hey, is there any reason to get a long slide? What link slide should I get? Should I get a Glock 19, a Glock 17, or a Glock 34? Right? Like, what's the difference? Why do these different links exist, and which one is the best? I think we're all pretty much competing right now with 5-inch guns. I'm not sure what everybody carries all the time, right? Is that correct? We're all running 5-inch guns.
Yep.
So why is that, guys?
Yeah.
What do we think about different gun lengths, and is one any better than the other? It doesn't matter. I got thoughts. But I'll let you go first.
Got thoughts.
Yeah, so I carry a 5-inch gun and I compete with a 5-inch gun.
Same.
I don't know. For me, the 5-inch guns tend to recoil a little bit slower, so it's a little bit less perceived recoil. And I say less perceived because I don't know for like, I don't. Is it less recoil? I don't know. My hands tend to think so.
Yep.
And that's literally the only reason. It's just a little bit easier to shoot, and by a little bit, I mean like a little bit. It's noticeable for me. That's it. I think the biggest thing is, like, if you want to know what size pistol you should get, maybe buy one and sell that one after a couple months, and then buy another one, a different size, and see how you like that one. Gain experience on it, because what I like might not be the same thing that you like, right? Personal preference is based off of experience with certain things. The stuff that I prefer might not be the same thing that you prefer.
Or if you got a little bit of extra dough, get a gun you can put multiple different slides on, right? That might be cool too.
Yeah, you can do that with Walther, by the way.
You can.
I'm biased, but
and M&Ps.
Just saying.
And M&Ps and SIGs and Glocks and like.
Who shoots those things?
Every gun out there that's not a piece of crap. Even Zev, believe it or not, you can do that with a Zev. No, so yeah, good stuff. Look, guys, if you can shoot, the length of your slide doesn't really matter. If you can't shoot, the length of your slide really doesn't matter. like you said, it's pretty minimal. There is definitely a difference, right? If you pick up a Glock 19, you pick up a Glock 34 and shoot those things, there's going to be a definite difference. Is there as much of a difference between a 17 and a 34? It's less, but yeah, sure, there is. Couple reasons, I think. Number one, just basic stuff. The longer your slide is, the more your gun's going to weigh, and heavier guns recoil less. Right? Pretty basic math stuff here, as far as that goes. Argument used to be about sight radius. Obviously, it's not so much of a thing if you're running dots anymore, so don't really worry about that too much. What also changes is your spring length, right? So if I run a compact gun or a full-size gun, the length of my spring is going to change, which is going to change, how much travel, is sort of allowed there and how the spring interacts with the slide over that travel. So that is part of the recoil impulse difference as well, as apart from just the way the slide tracks. I've tracked, I've tried a bunch of different stuff just so you guys kind of understand. I kind of have, I don't even know if this will kind of show up, but we're talking about very minimal changes here as well. So, talking about roughly a half inch between the three main classes of guns that Glock set up back in the day, and everyone has kind of followed since. 5-inch, 4.5-inch, 4-inch guns, roughly there, plus or minus a quarter, that kind of thing. So we're talking about fairly minimal differences in the guns. I started, when I first started running a dot, I was like, oh, sight radius doesn't matter anymore. I guess I just want a Glock 19 because that slide will track the fastest, and I want to be fast, and fast is good. So started running the 19 for everything. And look, you can run the heck out of a 19, especially if you have a big enough grip on it that you can actually control the thing. Grip, controlling the gun, I think the grip matters a lot more than obviously the slide length does. Couple things that I found with that though. The slide tracking faster, I think is less about the length of it. So in other words, I currently run a 5-inch slide, but it's, a significantly lightened slide. The weight that I want in the gun from being long is, up in the rail and, the barrel and all that kind of stuff. I actually kind of want the weight, from what I found works best for me, the weight in the actual reciprocating part in the slide to be less. So I have a longer, heavier gun with weight that is out in the front, which I find helps make the gun kind of feel more pointable. It helps me a little bit more precise on my transitions and stuff, I feel like, over the shorter guns, especially on wider transitions. I feel like I can steer it a little bit better into targets versus the shorter guns. And the recoil impulse is a lot different, but that the light and slide helps it track faster. And then kind of to counteract that, I run 147s, which helps the track a little bit slower. So it's kind of like a balancing game, but that combination of stuff I have found works really well for me. I kind of am with Nick. It's kind of a subtle difference, but that's been the best combination for me. There are guys that are better than I am that will make a much bigger deal out of this. I actually bought my first 5-inch gun after talking to Casey Eusebio one year at SHOT Show, and he blew my mind how seriously he took having a 5-inch gun over a 4.5-inch. And he's like, man, it's just whenever I have to shoot my a 17 size gun, he's like, I feel like my shots that should have been alphas ended up being Charlies, and my shots should have been deltas ended up being Mikes and stuff. And I'm just like, okay, dude, and like cool story. I'm not sure how that makes sense, but some guys really care about it. But for me, like I said, it's been a subtle difference. I prefer the 5-inch guns as far as the way they recoil, the way they drive, and so forth. But pretty much any of them will work. The last thing I will say though is for my concealed carry guys, what you think makes a gun more comfortable and easy to conceal might just be the exact opposite. So what I mean by this is when you shove a gun in your pants, the amount of mass that you get above and below the belt needs to kind of be balanced, right? So if I have a really short gun to where very little of the barrel is below the belt line, it is going to cause that gun a lot of times to tilt out away from the body as far as the grip getting farther away from the body because there's nothing below the belt that's keeping it straight up and down. So you may find a longer gun, for me personally, running a long gun like a 5-inch, or even a shorter gun, but like with an X300 on it, right, which is going to give you a longer holster, or a mod light or any other full size light, right, is going to give you a longer overall package, and it's actually going to be more comfortable and easier to conceal than a shorter gun. I assume you guys would
I would
agree with that as
very
well.
much agree with that. Yeah,
Yeah.
my 365 prints more than the freaking 5-inch Walther that I carry.
Yep.
Crazy, right?
Yep. And I
Yeah.
think that's something that I always point out to people who are trying to pick out a gun, especially if they're going to carry it. And even if even if you get a Glock 19, right? Because definitely a shorter grip can be easier to conceal.
Yes.
I'm like, dude, put that in a 17 or a 34 holster. So that gives you the extra length down there. And so then once your gun is seated in the holster, you still are able to take advantage of that leverage, and you don't have that issue with the gun kind of keeling over, tipping outwards, and printing. I always tell people that all of my inside the waistband holsters are 5-inch, whether I'm running my 4-inch slide, my 4.5, or my 5-inch slide. I always run the same holster. So I would definitely agree as far as the concealed carry part. Man, as far as the recoil goes, kind of just to echo what you guys said, I think you need to be a pretty dang good shooter, pretty clued in shooter, to really point out the significant differences.
Great point.
For sure.
I consider myself to be a pretty good shooter. I've shot a lot, man, and I've put a lot of time in on my 4-inch gun, and a comped 4-inch gun, and my 4.25 and my 5-inch. And at this point, I do prefer my 5-inch guns, but just marginally. The big difference that I see, especially in recoil, is I think you mentioned this briefly, Billy, but is with the grip size. And so for me, like on my 4-inch gun, it has a pretty short grip. It's actually maybe even a little shorter than a 19, which is great for concealment. But then my pinky kind of starts falling off the edge of that if my hand isn't just like super jammed up all the way high. And that affects my recoil control tremendously. And when I have a little bit of room on that big 17 length grip, the whole 17 rounds, like on a Glock, 17 or 34, I could kind of care less what slides on top a little bit, because I've got a lot to hold on to. So I really tell people, get something that is concealable for you. But make sure the grip is something you can hold on to. Slide length doesn't matter as much.
Yeah. I think that's a fantastic point. Two things you said there that I like a lot. Number one, I think you do need a certain level of skill to see the difference. And the reason for that, just to explain how it's partially because of how marginal the difference is. So like I mentioned before, like the combination that I found really likes for me, 5-inch gun, light and slide, slow bullets, right? How did I come to that? I specifically remember the first time someone gave me some kind of competition style 147 bullets to try out. And I was thinking, I've heard these things are slow, and I don't want to be slow. Are you guys hearing a trend here and what I look for in guns? Okay. So I was like, all right, I'm going to run some build drills. I'm going to see what happens, right? And of course, like at that time, my typical splits, like when I ran a build drill, it was like every single round, like 14, 15, 15, 14, 15, 14. Like that was like right where I was sitting on those, right? And I shoot that, like check my timer, go through my splits. I'm like, yep, that's what I'm looking for. Load up a mag with my 147s for the first time ever. And it was like 13, 14, 13, 13, 14, 12. And that was like the first time I'd ever seen a 12 before. And I'm like, this does not make sense to me. But that's like 100. But that's like 100th or 200ths faster than what I've been doing. So yes, I have a new favorite bullet now, right? But if like I wasn't shooting those splits consistently enough to be like within the same 100th, like I literally couldn't have told whether it was better or not, right? Because it was such a subtle difference. The only reason I even noticed it was because I had that level of consistency to begin with. So yeah, if you are currently out there running a Glock 17 and you're hearing me say that I prefer a Glock 34, do not feel like you need to go out and rush to the gun store and swap your guns out for 5-inch guns. But for those that are looking to get something new, the question is asked on a very regular basis, I know. So we just thought we would share some thoughts there.
And it's also, I think also you bring up a good point that a lot of that difference that you're going to see in the different slide lengths is going to be at speed. Man, I don't, maybe I'm wrong, but I don't really see much of a difference on like my 25 yards, untimed bulls.
Yep.
Right. Man, I let the gun recoil up. I let it do its thing. I make sure I'm not inputting any movement into that gun. Make sure I'm not pushing it down, which is my tendency. And I'm just letting that thing recoil up, and my grip kind of just brings it right back, and I settle the dot again in where it needs to be. But I think it almost becomes more of a timing issue, a timing thing. And if that gun and the slide and the ammo that you're running is timing up well, matching up well with your brain and your eyes and your trigger finger, like it's a lot of variables that have to match up, and that's why I think I think it can be complicated. But
yeah, 100%. Good stuff, guys. I think that's about it for us this week. Thanks to everyone listening. If you've made it this far, I salute you. Thanks for hanging in there with us. Hopefully some of this was helpful for you guys. And again, YouTube, Spotify, wherever you can find us. Let us know if you have questions that you would like for us to bring up on the next episode of Speed Up and Get Your Hits. Thanks, guys. We'll see you next time.